Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing a mix walkthrough of this mix template that I'm going to have available for you guys to download. And you can watch this video, follow along and learn what I'm doing, and also use the session template. The link will be in my Patreon if you want to go grab that one. But let's dive into it. So I wanted to create like a heavy mix with just stock plugins. That was sort of like my experiment. And it sounds pretty decent, like, all using stock plugins in Reaper, and I've got a list of the plugins that are third-party free ones that you can grab as well. So a resource list that's linked below as well. But let's take a quick look at the session, and then I'll go through piece by piece of what I did, and we'll take a listen. So this is the session here that I've got, and you can see it's all broken up into folders. They're all collapse at the moment. So what I've got here on the session template here is just a tempo map. That's just a piece of MIDI. Basically, this little dot here, basically you export that on a session and it'll give you the BPM if you do tempo changes. This song is in one tempo at 180, so nothing to worry about there, but it's good practice to do that. You'll also see here that I've got this folder here. It's called mastered stems. That's basically everything that's in this master folder just printed out into these 4 tracks. So I've got production, guitars, drums, and bass. I've got them muted here because I don't need them. They're just like the printed version of all the effects that we've got. So I'm just going to collapse that and ignore that for now. Everything that you'll be using in the template will be in this master folder here. So if you're new to Reaper, the way the routing works is you can create folders and see all of these routing here. These are all going to my main master here, the output, and there's no effects on here. So this is a good way of doing this if you want to bounce stuff out, have different multiple versions, like an instrumental, etc. like that. So I like to put my master bus in a folder and then have everything inside that folder, all the tracks. So these top 2 here, we don't need to worry about them. We can ignore them. The main template here is just going to be under this master folder. So if we open it up and expand it, you can see I've got a printed version of the production here that goes to the master, also an instruments bus. But before we get too far into the mix, let's take a quick listen to the track here. It's only a couple minutes long and we'll listen to what it sounds like, and then we'll go through piece by piece and break it down. So that's the track there. That's what it sounds like with the mix template, everything on. And it's in drop A, and A harmonic minor is the key. So something I don't usually write, like this sort of style track, but it was fun and interesting to try it anyway. So if I bypass all the effects, it sounds like this. If I just play one piece. So yeah, it's just DIs, raw drums and everything like that. So I'll turn everything back on and we'll go through it step by step and see what I did with routing and plugins and what plugins I used and everything like that. So also I had the production here, which I did from a different session. I like to split up my production, and that's sort of pre-mixed. So that has really nothing on it except for just an EQ here to clean up some of the bottom of the low end and sort of like some tone shaping to fit in the mix. So this is what it sounds like, just the production on its own. So it's just basically guitar leads and stuff like that. in between to make it a little more interesting to fill out the space. Also, we have the master folder here. So if we take a look at that, it's pretty stripped back here in the master. I just tried to use what was needed. So first up, we've got a Waves plugin here. And this is part of the Waves free bundle. So you can grab this one. It'll be in the resources list that you can grab as well, along with some other cool Waves plugins that are now free. So it's the EQ3 and it's first in the chain here. And I'm just boosting, looks like half a dB at 35 Hertz in the low end. And I think the top end at 12,000. So almost a half a dB as well, just over. So very subtle. That's probably the key thing with the master chains is like, if you get the mix a little bit more balanced, you don't have to do as much in the master. So a little bit of EQ. Then we've got some distortion. So it's actually at 0 drive, but this has an effect on the mix and I'll demonstrate that here. So I'll turn off some of these plugins here and I'll go through and you can sort of hear the difference. So we'll start off with the EQ here. The EQ might be hard to hear when there's nothing else on the master chain, but it sort of adds up there. If I add this distortion here, which I've got the drive set to 0, it just gives it some color. So that like sort of distortion color there. So if I add that in. So these other plugins, they all do a little bit to kind of add the sound. So the next up is another free plugin. This one is the Master Desk Classic, and you can get this free in the Plugin Alliance free bundle. And so this one here, I've just got the output trimmed a little bit. There's like a threshold meter here, and this one's sort of like there's there's a tone shaping and a little bit of stereo imaging, so 8% and the tone. And this foundation knob, you can kind of tweak the balance if it's going to be more brighter or more sort of bass heavy. I've just got it set in the middle and then the volume. So it's got some pretty limited controls, but it does make an impact on the sound. So take a listen. Again, it's very subtle with these ones because I've kind of dialed them back and tweaked them, but that sort of lifts the mix a little bit. And then I've got another one here by Plugin Alliance in that free bundle. It's this sub filter, and I've got it set to 32 Hertz here. And this low end control here is -2. So I pulled it back, and it's also got 3 settings here for the resonance. It's got low, high, and extreme. I've got it set to extreme. And so let's listen to that as well. And I'll put that on. So definitely with those chugs, that's probably the best example there when I'm sort of playing those open notes there. So in that breakdown part, you can really hear the difference with what this is doing. This is sort of adding like a lot of the beef on the low end. And it's easy to overdo this one, but yeah, I like it. It sounds cool. So it really gives it like that beef. So use this one sparingly and sort of dial it in. If it's too much, just roll back the low end sort of thing here. This gauge, you can either increase it, but this one's really easy to overdo, but it gives it some cool sub-harmonic thing. Also a little bit of EQ here, just very basic. So just rolled off the super lows. That's at 33. So pretty standard to roll off the really subs, like low subs. And there was some harshness with the guitars and some of the cymbals here. This is probably what I referenced from some like really cheap headphones. I like to have a pair of really cheap like fake AirPods and earbuds and test out the mix on those, because if it's really harsh in them, because they're not designed very well, it kind of brings it out more. So it's a good test there. So I've got that EQ, and then very lastly, there's just a limiter here, limit the output to -1. So we'll take a listen with all of this on and off in the master. So all that together, I think that it just kind of makes everything glue and lift together. So this is a compressor, I'm pretty sure as well. So it's compressing it and giving it some color. It's on the hard mode at the moment on the compressor. And then we've got like some low end boosts, a little bit of EQ, and a little bit of saturation with this distortion here with the LiL Tube from Waves. So all that gives it a nice sound, and they're all free plugins. So that's the master chain. And like I said, we went through the production chain here, which is just some EQ. Next, I have an instruments bus. And what the instrument bus is in a folder here. You can see it's receiving the bass, the guitars, the drums, the MIDI drums, which is in there as well. So that's basically it. You can add whatever else you would like. Usually if there's vocals, I'll route the vocals outside of this instrument bus, just the core band. So instruments, just think of it as like the core band, like the, just these basic elements here, drums, bass, guitar. Probably I'd run leads outside of this. I do have some kind of leads on this section here, but they're like sort of harmony guitars. So I've just got them in one folder here. So the instrument bus, we'll take a look here, is just a little bit of compression. Looks like the ratio only went 1.5. Usually go 4 here, but I guess I liked it here at 1.5. And yeah, this is just actually, I've just used a preset here, just this master glue. I liked what it did, so I just kept it on that. And also I have a little more of this LiL Tube, the Magna by Waves as well, except with the drive up at 12. So I've increased the drive a little bit to give it more saturation. So if I bypass those two together, so again, it's doing the same thing. This could be on the master. Basically, I don't have anything else except for the production, but I didn't want to put any more effects on the production because it's already sort of pre-mixed. So if I didn't have anything else and it was just the core band here, you could just put those on the master, but I've got them on the instrument bus there. And so we'll take a look at drums. So with the drums here, you'll notice that I've got a drum folder, which if I close it up, it has everything in it. If I open up the drum folder here, you're going to notice there's a bunch of folders here. So I've kind of split it up into 2. So with this here in my mix, I've got some pre-printed sort of sounds. So some from paid plugins, but this whole MIDI one is all free. So there's a version of that there. So you could basically load up the free version of whatever sampler, and it's all routed as well. So if you have the same sampler, or if you want to use another one, you can just swap out in Contact, and it's all routed in the same buses going to this master bus of the drums. So it's good as well if you want to kind of blend, say you have a MIDI sampler and you want to add samples. So you could look at this as like, you want to blend some samples. You could use this folder as well. So I just included it in there as well. So we've got, what you're actually hearing here is not the MIDI drums, but the processing will be the same for the MIDI drums and this one here. So we'll start at the kick. So we've got one kick here, and the kick doesn't have any processing on it on its own. It's kick 10 from Stephen Slate drums, and that's running into this folder up here, and that's got some processing on it. So basically we've got some EQ. So I'm just shaping the low end a little bit here and removing some of sort of that like a beach ball sound that comes in the kick sometimes, depending on the kick, and some of the mid range here. And looks like some more EQ, some more sculpting as well going through, lifting up some of the parts I liked, and some more sculpting as well. And this one here, this is another re-EQ here, but I've got automate on fast kicks. So I'll remove the EQs and I'll explain this automation here. So solo the kick, and you can see this is the automation that I've created. So you can see it's turned off when I'm outside of that automation, and then it kicks in. You can see this is a double kick section. So whenever it's fast, filter comes on here, a high pass, and it will like just turn on the plugin basically. I've also got some more processing on the kick as well. So I actually turn that off here as well. So the raw kick into the raw drums, that sounds like this. And if I turn on the processing, that sounds like this. So that's the EQ shaping there for the EQ on the kick drum. And then that's going into this bus, like I said here. This is a parallel bus, so with the kick and snare. So the snare and the kick are both going into this bus. And that's got an instance of OTT on it, and it's mixed in at 33%. So that's what's giving it some more beef. So as well. So if I turn that off, that's really pumping up the kick a lot there. So that's the same with the snare that's going to that bus. So we'll take a look at the snare as well. So nothing on I've got a blast beats track here just on its own. And then I've got the snare bottom and the snare top. And then that has some processing on it as well. So we're just compressing it a little bit. So not like a huge ratio, just a little bit there. I think I'm just using, like one of the presets again, aiming for about 4 dB gain reduction on this preset. And I have a transient controller that's turned off. You could use this one or the transient shaper, which this is linked as well. This one sounds better, the transient shaper by Kilohertz. And I've got the attack and the sustain up a little bit. Usually I just add attack, but I think I wanted a bit more sustain just because I don't have much parallel channels. So that's got some effect on the snare. Plus I've got the built-in Reaper saturation, just maxed out 2 of those. And some EQ shaping as well, cutting out some of that boxiness in the 500 and a bit of a lift. And same thing as well, just some more sculpting and removing some of the stuff I didn't like, just things kind of tweaking the mix. So every template, you got to sort of like, we'll have to adjust certain things with the different instruments. And, you know, every time you change something, you might have to adjust it. So this is sort of like shaping and then rolling off the low end again, just to make sure it's cleaning up the mix and not getting overwhelmed with the low end with all the instruments. So we'll take a listen to the snare with this without the processing. So obviously that's giving a lot of volume / some of the attack is being boosted with this transient shaper and the saturation as well, giving it a boost. So that's all going into that same bus up here with the kick and snare with OTT on it. That's the kick and the snare processing. And then we've got a snare sample, which is just a room sample. It sounds like this. And I've got it turned off or not even in there at all for the blast beats, or just turned down very low. And it's just to help with the snare, giving that snare room, because in this setup here, I'm not using any rooms. So I wanted to kind of have a setup where you might not have any rooms and you would emulate sort of like using the key elements for a mix. Like the snare is like the main thing you want from the room basically. And that just has some compression on it here. So any snare room here, just kind of smashing it with a compressor. So yeah, pretty extreme compression with that. Then we've got the toms here, and the toms, these are the GGG toms, and similar with the snare, I've got a little bit of saturation here with this little tube. Put the drive up at 13, and these EQs will all be very similar. It's just like shaving off the low end, removing some of the mids, boosting some of the attack of where it sounds like natural or good, depending on the tuning and what type of recording you have. Transient controller, it's turned off there. Same thing, using just the attack here for the kilohertz transient shaper. And then I'm just limiting it with this event horizon, so clipping it so it doesn't like overload the compressor later down the chain. All of those are the same here. So let's take a listen to the toms. It's feeding into this bus here, which just got some EQ as well. So 60 hertz boosting at 2.3. Looks like 7.2 I'm boosting at 6.6. And that's it, basically. So a little bit subtle EQ with this Waves EQ3. So we'll turn off that processing and we'll take a listen to the toms with it on. Again, obviously giving it volume. Those aren't being fed into any parallel bus except for the main parallel bus. So you could send that to this kick and snare bus if you wanted to, but I feel like it would be a bit too much. It sounded good with just how it was. So that's the toms. So hats and any like close mics, cymbals or anything like that, I haven't really done any processing because I didn't really need it. The overheads here sound like this. So that has a little bit of processing because this one I don't have any room samples. So I just wanted to add a little bit of life back into it. So on its own, it sounds like this. You can see it's got no shells. So in GGG, I turned off all the shells just so it doesn't like, if you have a really dense mix, if you're trying to do stuff with a lot of like kicks and a lot of elements, it can kind of cloud up the mix. So I've turned that off so it's just the overhead cymbals and whatever close mics. I only had a ride in this one. If I had like I only had hats in this one. If I had a ride or any other sort of like close mic cymbals, I'd have them in here as well, going to a cymbals bus. But I've only processed the overheads here, and what I've got, another free plugin, it's RAM by Native Instruments. So putting this just to kind of give it a little bit of like, you can hear the sheen in the cymbal, which is really nice. And I'm compressing it with the attack overheads preset here, and just a little bit of sort of finessing it into the mix here. If there's anything, little fine tuning elements here, probably something in the mids that was clashing, a little bit of a high end boost. So we'll take a listen here. I'll try and show an example of what that reverb's doing here. There's a part. Oh yeah, I think this part here. So these three here, so that's with it on, we'll turn it off. It's pretty subtle, but it just gives it a little bit more length and yeah, kind of helps it sit, feel a bit more natural. So that's basically it. It's pretty basic. And all of those are feeding into this main bus here. So this is the drum bus, and this is like more parallel processing. And that has OTT set at 27% and some of the highs and mids and lows tweaked there on these bands. And that's also going into a clipper limiter here, the event horizon here, just so clipping the drums further. So I'll turn off that parallel and I'll solo the drums and then I'll put them on. I think it just makes the drums smack so much harder. It sounds, yeah, really gelled. I love what that's doing to all the drums. So that sounds awesome. And that's all for the drums. Now, if you are using your own sort of MIDI drum library, I have these MIDI drums here. Same settings are applied. The only difference here is this is the MIDI track here, and all the routing is set basically the same. It's going to go through this parallel chain. The same parallel chains are on the kick and snare and everything like that. So what I have is Crim drums. I have the full version, but they do have a free version that you can get that has limited stuff, but you could use those drums. They sound awesome, and just use the free version of it or any other drums that you have. So I'll quickly play what these sound like. I'll bypass our other drums. So a different flavor for sure, like sounds cool. So every different drum will have a different sort of sound. So they sound cool. These actually have rooms and stuff as well, so it sounds a little bit different. I do like it. I like both of them. So it just really depends what you want to do, but this kind of shows you that this template's a bit flexible of what you want to do, so you can kind of work in whatever you want. And I'll show you more of that as well when I get to the bass and the guitar tones, sort of how I did that as well. So that's the drums. So we'll take a look at the bass. So originally when I made this track, I made a bass tone, and it's sort of a custom tone that I made with Saturn 2, and I printed it down, and that had paid plugins and a whole bunch of effects. And then I tried it with Parallax, and Parallax sounded cool. So I have Parallax here. If you want to if you have that, you can use that tone as well. This original bass tone is where I started. Then I went to Parallax, and then I was experimenting with this free tone here, which you'll get in the template, which has just free plugins. So I'm going to demo all three of these tones just so you can see what the paid ones sound like compared to what I made with the free one. So let's solo the bass here, and let's take a listen to the first one, the Saturn bass tone. So that was the one, didn't end up using that, but that's the custom tone that I made. And then this is Parallax. So it sounds pretty cool. Just depending, they all sound pretty cool. And then the free tone. So I reckon the free tone actually sounds pretty cool. So let's take a look at what I'm doing here. So I've got the DI signal, and I've split it into two tracks. So I've got a sub track and then a grit track, which should be called grit. But so I've got the sub and the grit, and the sub is like this. So let's take a look here. I'm just filtering it. So I'm cutting out. So the threshold here is like 293. So it's cutting all that top end out, leaving room for our grit track. And then I'm just rolling off the super lows here. The high pass at 36, just to clean it up. Make sure it's not too overbearing. Going into a clipper and limiter. Then going into a limiter again. And then going into that sub filter, like I showed on the master, just on the high setting. And at 24 Hertz, just pulling it back on the low end, going, or maybe I'm boosting there. 10? Yeah, I've maxed it out. So I've maxed it out there and just turned down the output gain a little bit and the input gain. That's just by ear. And that's also going into another limiter. So if I turn all those off, it sounds like this. Because here I'm kind of clipping it a lot as well. So that's the subs. And then we have a grit track. And I'm using, this is a free one by Waves, the GTR. Just using an ordinary guitar amp. You can use any guitar amp basically, because it's not like real life. Like you're not going to blow up the speaker or the amp or anything like that. So I've got, this is by the Plugin Alliance in the free bundle. It's like an emulation of a rat pedal. And it's like the Black Distortion 2. So I've got some distortion here set, almost halfway. Same with this filtered, and the volume's just set in the middle. And that's going into this guitar amp on the overdrive setting. Just a preset, and I think I'll boost the gain up just a touch here, 6.9. And then that goes into another filter here. So this filter is basically the opposite of what we were doing with the other one. So just getting that point where I think it's all right. So it looks like I'm cutting it off here at 8. almost 880, so 879. So leaving room for the low ends and just taking up that space in the grit. You could split the bass up into 3, which I've experimented doing with that as well. But I mean, this is cool as well. It's just one of those things you can try out, and that's all going in just into this EQ here for some tone shaping for the mix. So if you think of those two tones, this is one blending together. We're just splitting it up. Parallax is basically doing the same thing with a low, mid, and a high. We're just doing it manually here with the free version of it, of our tones. So that's all going into a bass bus here, and the bass bus looks like we're just using a little bit of EQ shaping here. It looks like they were boosting at 30, like the low end's 35 hertz, 5.4, and nothing in the mid range. That's basically it. So just the low end sub, and looks like again 0.3 dB boost at 1.5 almost, or 1.2, and that's about it. And a little bit more EQ shaping. So this would just be, like I said, just shaping the mix, rolling off the super highs that we don't really need in the bass mix anyway. We've already rolled off the low ends, and then that's going into this Rear Comp X or X Comp, which it's just a preset that I've used here. So it says super solid bass with like opto mids. I just chucked that on there, see what it sounds like. And it looks like I did blend it here. You can see in Reaper, you can actually blend stuff in parallel, which that's what I love about Reaper. It has a lot of flexibility. So it's like 31% wet on the effect here. So this is parallel. So if your plugins don't have like a mix knob, you can mix anything basically with this one here in Reaper, which is a cool little trick if you haven't tried that. So that's just in parallel. So that's our bass tone. And then there's our guitar tone, which is pretty simple as well. So I started off with Fortin, Nameless. Just this is like literally default. I didn't change anything with the tone. If you want to hear that tone before the free tone, it sounds like this. So that's Fortin, and then the free tone that we made sounds like this. And it's not bad for like a free amp. So I'll go through that here. So basically the free tone here, we have this is part of the plugin alliance as well. So we've got like a Tomb Screamer, like a called Green Screamer, and a little bit of overdrive, a little bit of tone. And that's going into this amp here, which is Mega Single by Plugin Alliance as well. Using this 19 English 4x12 with a, looks like a dynamic 57. And so the gain rolled back, just using the single or the solo part of the amp. I think you can split this, or you can do the rhythm or lead. It looks like I'm doing the lead here and the solo, and on the modern setting here. So a little bit of treble, mid rolled down a little bit in the bass, rolled down, presence in the middle at noon. That's basically it. Didn't really touch anything else, just a couple little tweaks on the amp. And these EQs would just be tone shaping, just because, yeah, pulling out some of the lows for the bass here at that 300. Usually 100, and like, yeah, things can get a bit like overwhelming in the mix depending on how you mix the guitars and the bass, just trying to get them to gel well together. So that's the same for the rhythms. And then there's like the harmony guitars. It's the same setting, but I've got rear delay here for this delay effect. You can see the settings here. So just like going into Supermassive by Valhalla. So that that harmony channel with the effects sounds like this. And without effects. Yeah, those two effects free as well, just gives it a bit more life and a bit more interest to those parts. Very straightforward. So that's the guitars, and they're going into this guitar folder, just a bus, and then they're going into another bus. This one has nothing on it. And this one has more EQ. So trying to bring out the mids, and listening here with the bass and seeing at the point where they kind of like fit well together in that low section. So that's probably just me boosting there. Same with here, some tweaks, just some fine tuning, lifting them up to make it more interesting and, you know, a bit more brighter in the mix. And another free plugin by the Plugin Alliance. It's this shred spread. So it's basically like a stereo imager you can use on your guitars, and it's pretty cool. It's a free one. And yeah, so that's the guitar bus there. So I've done the bass guitar, the guitars, the drums, and that's really it. So it's a very stripped back sort of template, and it's good for like writing and everything like that. It's like you got your MIDI drums, you can add samples if you want, you can replace stuff, you can track in your guitars or drop in stuff. And then what I like to do is have like a separate session for production and then just drop them in, just so you're not overwhelming. Or you can even add, you know, whatever production stuff you want to hear, you want to put like, you can just build upon this. So I kind of kept it like that. That was the main goal of this template. So yeah, it's all routed out and it's all sort of ready to go. So for the instruments and samples I was using for this mix, if you're curious to know, I was using my Schecter C7 Pro guitar. So I was using Shin's bass via Submission Audio for the bass DI. Also for the cymbals in this mix, I was using Modern Massive just without the shells. And the toms, I was using Modern Massive, the Yamaha recording custom birch set. And for the snare bottom, I was using Modern Massive, the Gretsch Bell brass high tune snare. And that's because I was using the top snare as the Stephen Slate Trigger chili snare. So I wanted that sort of, I wanted to kind of have like a high tuned sort of like natural sounding mixed snare for that. That's what I was kind of going for. Not something too over the top, a bit more organic. And yeah, so I blended those two together. And then I had a room snare by Gecko Drums, the Slammers. They have this grainy Arrow room snare, which I like the sound of. And it mixed really well. It's in the same tuning as those other ones, or I just tweaked it to kind of fit. And the kick was Kick 10 by Stephen Slate Trigger. And my Schecter C7 Pro guitar with Diamond Decimator pickups. That's what you're hearing in the track here. And that's all what I use. So really, it's not really relevant too much about the gear. You can probably, you know, use whatever you've got. If you have some of the same tools, they'll sound very similar to this. But every template is just a template as a starting point, and it will kind of get you to a point where, you know, maybe it's skipping a step of routing or setting up a tone, but they'll always need a little bit of tweaking depending on what you're doing, and they might evolve. So hopefully this helps you out. And if you're brand new to mixing or something like that, it's a good head start. I wanted to create some resources to help you out. So on the Patreon, if you want to take a look in the description, I'll have all the lists of the plugins where you can grab them, all the resources, all the fun stuff like that, plus my Patreon link if you want to pick up this template. There's a free version of it without any of the stems or anything like that. And also, if you want to support me in the channel, there's like a premium one where you can get the stems and practice mixing. Also the printed stems. So if you want to tone match some of the tones I made, they're printed in there anyway. But if you don't have the same equipment, you want to kind of get close and tone match, they're there as well. So it's all down there in the description below. So check those out. So thanks for watching. Hopefully this helps you out, and I'll see you all in the next video.